Welcome, everyone. Well, today we're going to be talking about free motion quilting, thread painting, what's the difference, and how we can set up our machine so that we're getting the best results and the results we're looking for. So I'm going to show you a couple of quilts that I have started working with, where I've combined some embroidery and also some free motion quilting and some thread painting. And as we get going, if you have any questions, please make sure to ask us. If you watch this after the recording's over with, then I will try and come back and answer those questions later on. But I think it's going to be a fun show, and I hope it's going to excite everybody to try some little bit outside of the box thread painting and free motion. All right. So the first quilt that I'm going to show you is something that I did years ago, and it really is some designs that came from the Creative Icon and Icon 2. And you can see that there is a lot of thread painting in the back of it. Now, the difference between thread painting and free motion really has to do with how much of it is. This fabric actually had an organza on top of it. So I had to stitch it pretty close so that it would hold the organza in place. And you'll notice the dragonfly that's sitting right here. That's actually something that's not attached. I just made this yesterday and pinned it in place, and eventually I'll sew it. But this was done with thread painting, and it only took me, I think, maybe 10 minutes to do this. It's a really quick project and something that everybody can do pretty easily. So I'm going to show you how it's possible to do this kind of artwork, but do it in a way that makes it fun and easy. You'll notice also that I'm wearing a dragonfly. This dragonfly is attached with a magnet. And this is another one. I made this one this morning. It only took me probably about 10-15 minutes. And I had a lot of fun playing with it. I'll bring it a little, whoops, wait a second. There you go. A little closer. And you can see the wings. And then I have a magnet on the back so I could use it as a clip. And I just glued that on there. So fun things. You don't always have to be using free motion for a quilt. I incorporate a lot of the free motion into garments that I make and into projects that I'm doing in a lot of different ways. For example, this is an embroidery that was done, and it's all done on one piece of fabric, but it's actually 4 different blocks. So when you're looking at this, there's a line down the center right here. And then the sky was different. Now, the sky had a different design to it, and I cut part of it out, and I decided to just do my own free motion for the sky. But you'll notice if you look closely at some of the sunflowers that they really didn't join up all that well because the design wasn't really meant to do that. There was meant to be a window pane in there. So I'm going to bring this over to my machine. And right now, today, I'm working on the Creative Icon 2. But I do a lot of free motion and thread painting with the 720, which is a fabulous Quilt Expression 720. There's a lot of different machines that do a fabulous job for doing free motion and thread painting. We're going to go to the, I'm going to flip over to my Creative Icon 2 and see that in a moment. And we are going to be talking about threads, bobbins, what to use in both of them. So if there's any questions about that, we're going to cover them today. So please make sure as we're going, if I haven't answered your questions, I'm going to come back to them, and I'll make sure to get to them before the end of the day. Okay. So I'm going to flip over to our machine, and right now on the Creative Icon 2, there's a screensaver. So I'm just going to touch the screensaver, and I'm going to set up for free motion. So down at the bottom where it says free motion, I'm going to select that, and I'm going to use the spring foot. So the dynamic spring foot is the one that comes with the Creative Icon 2. The spring foot that's got the open toe to it, like I'm showing here, this is the one that I'm going to use, and I usually prefer to use that than the dynamic spring foot. The Sensormatic foot is one that floats. Instead of going up and down, it just floats and stays level. And then we also have a setting for the ruler foot. But I'm going to choose the spring foot, and I'm on a straight stitch. And really, it's not going to matter too much because when you're doing free motion quilting, you are controlling the stitch by how fast you move the fabric. So this stitch length is rather irrelevant. The other thing that's important here, though, is the tension. And when we're doing a straight stitch and in free motion, we are showing the tension is active, not the active stitch technology. So I'm going to come over here to my screen and show you the needle. You can see that I do have the spring action foot selected, and I'm just going to use my needle threader. And when I'm going to do free motion, and I'll zoom in here a little bit more so you can see it. When I'm going to do free motion, if I wanted to add some stitches to make that sunflower look a little bit more complete, I'm probably not going to want to use a high tension because I don't want it to pucker. So I'm going to lower the tension, and I'm going to start somewhere around a 4.0 or a 3.8. Let's say 3.8. And I have my thread threaded. In the bottom, I have a white thread, and in the back, I've got a printed sunflower fabric. So I think it's just going to blend in there quite all right. The trick is that if I'm going to start doing free motion quilting, I need to make sure either I move the fabric fast or I slow my machine down. I'm going to use my foot pedal to start, and I'm just going to show you. And then I'm going to use my automatic cut. So when I was done, you can see that I've added some stitches. Let me just pull this up a little bit more. I've added some stitches in here to fill the space. But I do see that there's a little bit of white bobbin thread coming up. And so that to me means that I need to go and lower the tension. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to come back over to our screen to show you what I mean. So whenever you are doing free motion quilting, like you saw here on this back, that was free motion quilting. I want the top thread and the bottom thread to meet in the middle. And you can see in the back, the threads, you see everything looks about the same. All of the threads are meeting in the middle. But when you're doing thread painting, you don't want the thread to meet in the middle. Usually what you want is the top thread to come to the back. And that changes the balance a little bit, and it's very easy to do that. And usually it means you're going to be lowering the tension. We're going to come back to that a couple of more times. But the other thing that makes a difference to how much the stitches are going to show on the surface, you can see here, I didn't finish it. I just added a few stitches right here. And I would come back, you can see there's still some background that's showing. I would come back in there and do a little bit more on that. So even this was an embroidery. Often when I join multiple embroideries together and I find that there's I like a little bit of a gap or something like that, I will use a thread painting method to fill that in and finish that up. And here's another example of a quilt that I'm working on. Now this quilt is done with ribbon embroidery. Some of the techniques are also done with in sewing, like some of these ribbons. This was a little flower was done in sewing. And then I've got some freestanding embroidery here. And if you look down on the bottom corner, you will see there's a daisy that's sitting down at the bottom. And it's just kind of sitting there. Let me move it up so it's a little closer for you to see. It's sitting there, and I haven't attached it yet, but it is supposed to kind of look like a flower is dropped from my vase. And that is another way that, and I'll take it out so you can see. Isn't that adorable? So when I'm working on a project, like something like this one here, I never really think of it as closed. Even though I've quilted the background on the top and the bottom, I'm still adding a lot more to it. And it's because I have that ability to decide, okay, I'm going to make some freestanding flowers and I can put them wherever I want to. So it really does give me that ability to kind of keep developing a design when I haven't really finished it the way that I might want to. So, and there's a good question. Somebody asked, Denise asked, would you normally pull up your bobbin thread in the beginning? If I was doing free motion, then I would pull up my thread in the beginning. But when I'm doing thread painting, I don't. Often what I really want to do is just lock it into place so that I'm going to be able to keep going and hide that. Now, look at this flower. Isn't that adorable? And really what I did for this was I printed some pictures of the kinds of things that I wanted to do. The dragonfly, the flowers, and I can print them on fabric, or I can print them just on a piece of paper like this for inspiration. Sometimes I will cut them out to be able to just have like a paper pattern so I could draw it on my stabilizer. But often, because I have a good selection of fabric sheets, I will print them through my inkjet printer, and then I'm going to just run them through. And now it's a piece of fabric that I can embroider on to give my inspiration and maybe some color choices or where the shading changes. This would give me that opportunity to do that. So I think you can probably see the similarity between this dragonfly and the one that's right over here. Now, when I did that, I did not have the wings. I cut the wings off. The only thing I kept was the body, but I did draw on my stabilizer the picture of the wings, so I knew about the size that I wanted it to be. And when I'm working on something like that, I will either use a wash away. This is Dissolve Away Max, which is a relatively heavy piece. And I often, and in this case I used some sparkly tulle for the wings, so that if I didn't do a perfect job sewing the dragonfly together, I would be able to have it all hold together by putting those fabrics in together like that. And I can either put the organzas and the stretchy tools underneath, or I can put them on top. It really doesn't matter. But I do want to make sure that I've got some way of the whole design staying together in case I don't add enough stitches. And that's a good thing. Now, for a needle size, I usually use the smallest needle that I can. If a 7511 or an 80 will work, then that's what I want to use, because I don't want to put a lot, I don't want to push the fibers out of the way. I want to stay where they are. And I know that that size needle will wear down relatively quickly, but I would rather it wear down and change the needle than to use a bigger size needle. You'll almost hear it popping as it's going through the stabilizer. So in this case where I printed these on pictures, you'll see also a similarity. Here, I'll bring up my daisy here. There's a picture of the daisy that I did. And that was my inspiration piece where I saw that. And I don't cut out all of the petals for the daisy. What I'll do with it is I'm going to start stitching with the whole piece of fabric, one big piece of fabric. I'm going to stitch all around the white petals to the stabilizer. And once that's done, then I'm going to cut all the rest of that fabric away so that I can finish adding my stitching. And I've got a couple of other examples of that, and I'll show you that in a little bit. Here is a new dragonfly that I'm going to be working on. And you can see I've used a sparkly net for this. This is like a stretch fabric. And I just tacked it with a little bit of Roxanne's Basic Glue just to hold it in place. And then I'm going to put another layer on top of it like that. And that's how I'm going to do the stitching so that I can keep it, the foot from getting caught in it, but I also can see well enough for it to go. Here's another example. Now, when you're looking at, if you think about Googling images, right? Think about all the natural bird pictures and dragonflies and things like that. That's where I get a lot of my inspiration from. So here's some pictures of the birds, and I love doing birds. And here's an example of the bird that I made from that. And you can see it's kind of, well, let me just put it over here a little bit. It's kind of stiff, but that's because there's just so many stitches in there. That's the back of it, and that's the front of it. And I did add quite a few stitches to it. There is no fabric in here. When I started it, I just kind of laid down some stitches. And then I decided that I really needed more help. So I did print it out on a fabric sheet. And then I put the fabric down underneath it so I could tell where the shading should be, whether I was going to need the stomach to be white enough or the color of the chest. And it did help me to have that fabric underneath to be able to see what I was doing. One of the questions, what do you adhere the fabric to for printing? Well, fabric sheets, actually, there's a lot of different brands of fabric sheets. If you decide you're going to go that route, I highly recommend it because it makes you brave to try something more challenging. The Electric Quilt's got fabric sheets, and these are all ones you can buy them in the craft stores. June Taylor's got a whole bunch of them. I like to buy ones that are color fast so that there's going to be a little of that color showing behind. But it's really very, very simple. You just put it into your printer. I load all of the pictures onto like a Word document and just space them so I'll be able to cut them out individually. And then I print it. I don't have to adhere it to anything because on the back of it, there's a page, a plastic piece that will just come off of it. And I just, after I wet the fabric, because they say to wet it, then all you do, let me pull this off here so you can see what this is going to be like here. And I say that, but it may take me a second here to pull it off. There we go. So after you print it, they say to wet it for about a minute, and that sets the color. And then you just peel off the back of it. And now it's just one layer of fabric, and there's no extra piecing onto it like that. So this makes a really great base if you want to do more natural subjects like flowers. The other thing I'll often do is I'll take a piece of fabric like this, and maybe I just see I want to do these sunflowers. Well, I'll cut some of those pieces out, and I'm going to use that as the basis for my design, and I'll put them underneath, and then I'll do the thread painting on top of them. There is, and I've got tons more samples, so make sure you stay to the end because I want to show you some really cool ideas. But the fabric sheets do help to make you brave. And really, one of the things that's the most challenging about doing free motion quilting is feeling like you're not going to waste fabric. You're not going to waste time. You want to just get off to a good set. So the idea, like I did with the dragonfly here, of being able to have a little bit of an inspiration underneath. So I knew the size of the wings and what size the body was going to do. It just saved me time, but it really is all stitching. There's nothing here but stitching that's showing. And I've done some satin stitches. I've done all kinds of different colors. And then I've kind of, if I don't like it, I'll add more stitching on top. Okay. So I'm going to move back to our machine and we're going to do some more thread painting as opposed to free motion. And I'm going to, I'll go to the screen so everybody can see that, and hold on a second and we're going to come back. All right. Now in a traditional quilt, when you're doing free motion, like stippling, you want that balanced stitch and you want it to look nice. Now that's not a balanced stitch on the back of it, right? And so that's not what a balanced stitch looks like. Here's the back of the one that I adjusted. Usually when you're doing free motion quilting, you want to check that out. But when it comes to doing thread painting, and I'll come back, you really do want to look at what your tension is, and you're almost always going to go much lower. So if I was the first stitch, when I touch the original stitch, the tension's at 4.6. That's a normal sewing tension. I'll usually come down quite a bit when I'm thread painting. And I'm going to come down to like 3.2. Let's try that. All right. Now, here is a sunflower. I've got this big, big sunflower, and this is what I'm going to do some thread painting on. You'll notice that I started by just doing some decorative stitching around that outside edge, just to kind of lock the fabric down. In this case, I have also a piece of puffy foam, and I've got a fabric on the back. Now, if I'm doing a messy thread painting, I don't usually add the back until the very end. But in this case, I put it on because I'm going to show you an example of what you can end up with when you're done. So here is my upper thread. And if I wanted to bring that bobbin thread up to the top, then all I can do is tap my foot pedal, put the needle down, bring it back up. And now my bobbin thread comes up to the surface like that. And let me pull it out. But as I said, I don't usually bother with that when I'm doing thread painting. And I will just take a few stitches and I'll cut that away. So we're going to move this a little closer so you can see. All right. And let's focus out a little bit better. All right. So I'm going to just start by moving backwards. I've got a yellow thread on. And then I'm going to trim that thread away from the surface so that my foot doesn't accidentally get caught on it. And if I feel like I'm having a hard time controlling my stitches, and I would like my stitch length to be a little bit more even, I can use the speed control on my machine. I'm going to do that right now. I'm going to adjust my speed control to halfway. And instead of using my foot pedal, I'm going to use the start button on my machine. And now the needle's going to go up and down. And I don't have to worry about controlling the speed. So in this case, you can see I've got my stitches. They're pretty nice. They're relatively even, but I'm not worried about that when I'm doing thread painting, because ultimately I'm going to be covering this all with thread. So now I'm going to use my foot pedal. You'll see there's a difference. The faster I move my fabric, the longer my stitch. All right, so let me show you an example. I'm going to come back to the camera and we'll show you a couple of other things. So that project I'm working on, that's what made this bowl. The difference in the sunflowers, I started with a sunflower fabric. So that's where I'm going to get my inspiration from colors. When I did this one, I had a batik on the back and I had an orange fabric. I took some fabric colors and I colored in the rest of the outside of the petals. And then I appliqued another fabric that was in the bottom to the center of this. And so what I'm doing right now with that sunflower is going to end up looking exactly like this. So after remember I said that I used a foam, a puffy foam. Well, there's two different types of puffy foam. One of them is the puffy foam that you can use when you're doing embroidery for the hats and stuff like that. And that one's not affected by humidity too much. But the one that I was using, sorry, I'm just going to go and grab it over here. The one that I'm using for this project with the sunflowers that makes this is the very, very cheap foam that you can buy at the craft store. It is not very thick, but what its claim to fame is that it shrinks. And so after I finished this project and I finished all the decorative stitching, I did a satin stitch around the edge. So the way that you would start to work on this project is you would start doing free motion quilting around the outside petals, just like I did with the sunflower. Then you cut all the extra fabric away, all the extra puffy foam, and all the extra bottom fabric that's on the back, so that all you have is the raw edge. I finished doing a lot of free motion piecing, free motion quilting for all the flower petals. I'm going to bring this close so you can see. You can see how crinkly it is. That happened because after I did all of the stitching, it was flat like a placemat. And then I heated it up. You can heat it up with a heating gun, but I like a little more control. So what I did is I put it in the oven on a bowl upside down like this, and on an oven that was between 200 to 250, and start at 200. See if it starts after about 10 minutes, it's going to start kind of moving and shrinking. And if it doesn't at 200, then move it up to 250. And I kept an eye on it. I think it took me about 15, 20 minutes for it to get to this shape. But isn't that just adorable? Now, when I was finished with this, it was not as stiff as this. So I could have put a stiffy on, like that. It's a stiffy product you can buy at the craft store. But I decided that I wanted a little bit of a shine and I wanted it to be more waterproof. So what I ended up putting on it was a gloss varnish instead. And I just brushed it on and let it dry. And so that's where it gets the shine. And that's also where it got a little bit more stiffer. Okay. So when I use, somebody had a question about coloring in fabric. When I'm using coloring in fabric, I'll use everything. I use fabric markers. I use fabric pencils like Inktense pencils. I'll use the ink from Inktense. There's Jacquard paints. There's all kinds of different things. And really, you've got to experiment with what you like. But a lot of the fabric markers that I use, I've used Spectrum Noir and the Fabrico ones. They're all fabulous. Whatever I have, that's what I'm going to use, whatever color I want it to be. But it's hard to believe that all of this fabric was orange, and then I just colored it in to add that color to it. And in the beginning, the whole flower was orange, and I stitched it first before I decided to add the color. So you can kind of change your mind as you're going to. And, oh, here's a good question. Karen asked, when you iron the fabric after you wet it or air dry it, it really doesn't matter. I'm usually impatient, so I will iron it. I'll turn it upside down and I iron it, and that makes it, because when I'm ready to do it, I'm ready to do it. And so that's what I did with this. I basically just wet it. And if you don't wet it, it's not like that fabric's not going to go away. The color's going to go away. It's just not going to be long term. It won't stay. But as long as you've covered everything with stitches, it's not going to matter anyways, right? So I don't worry too much about it. But that's a real simple, easy thing to do. All right. Now, the project that I was doing, hold on, let me just get it cut and I'll cut it. So you can see that you're starting to get some texture there, right? Whenever I'm working with a project like a plant or a bird, you're always kind of thinking what direction you want the stitches to go. And usually you can tell by the fabric, if you're looking at something printed, is that you can see that all of the stitching is going up and down. So by putting that stitches in the same direction, that's going to give you the look you're looking for. Same thing when you're doing the bird, like you're going to go in the directions of the feathers. And that's the kind of stuff, it doesn't take too long to fill this out. The center part here is going to be, I'm probably going to go around in circles, like small little circles to do the center part. But you'll notice that some of the leaves are missing, like right over here, right? I had to cut that flower out, and there really is not those leaves down in this part here. So what I would do is take the fabric and I would cut more leaves out and lay them on top and stitch them to complete the fabric. So don't worry about doing that. That's a legitimate thing to do. And let me pull up that fabric so you can see it. This is the fabric that I cut that fabric. I know you're going to cry because I cut this whole piece out of there. Look at that. Isn't that amazing? So what I would do is if I needed some more petals, is I would just go and freehand cut these petals out and add them to my design so that I could complete the petals over here. Anything that's outside of that one sunflower is all getting cut away. And at this point, I could literally go in there and do that. Okay. And let me just show you what I'm talking about so you really understand what I'm going to do. I'm going to just manually cut right like that. As soon as I've got the stitching that's in place, right? So you can see those that are there. Because I went in and I've stitched around all the petals, I can keep doing thread painting like this on them. But at some point, I want that edge to be free. And so I'll usually add about this much stitching, and then I'll cut all the rest of it away so that I can start to get the shape of the flower. And then for these raw edges that I have, I'm going to cover them up doing some like a satin stitch. I'm going to show you what that looks like, and that's why I'm cutting this away. Because the difference between thread painting and free motion painting is often when we're thread painting, we're stitching on the very edges of the seams, which kind of gives you a really vibrant look to the edge. So when you look here at this bowl that I did, you can see how much satin stitch is on that edge, and that kind of helps in the curling of it. When I'm doing for sunflower, and if I was making maybe big placemats, I might not want quite as much of the satin stitch. But that's kind of a choice when you're starting to work, what you want the end result to look like. Okay, I'm going to come back over and we're going to look at doing a little bit more of this. I'm going to show you the satin stitch, and then I'm going to show you how I would develop the dragonfly and stitching your own dragonfly. Okay, so let's go back to our machine. And when we're working with our stitching, let's look at our stitches here. We have a satin stitch is stitch number 12. And if I wanted to stitch on the edge, that width of that comes up at a 6.0. I'm probably not going to want to keep the width that wide. I'm going to bring that down to a 4.2. Let's try that. And the reason that you want to be using this open toe to do your free motion is you need to be able to have the needle swing left and right. If the needle can't swing left and right, then you can't be stitching on that edge. So I'm going to come on the edge of this flower that I just did and show you when I'm doing this, the needle is on the right, it's off the fabric. And then when it goes to the left, now it's on the fabric. And I can decide that I want to angle it. I'm going to angle this a little bit so you can see how that goes. So it's off and back on. Now, because it's thread painting, you can go back and forth. It's not like sewing. You have the full direction. You can go any way you want to. So you can see what a nice job it did catching in all of those extra threads. And now I'm going to come back a little bit more seriously. And I'm moving very slow. And I'm making sure the needle comes off the fabric to the right. And I might come right to the very end like that. And now I'm going to change direction. And I didn't cut the thread. I just kind of now I'm off the fabric. And I'm going to come back this way. You can see I kind of have an angle to it. And I can move back and forth. Isn't that fun to play with? Now, one of the things that's so great about doing thread painting like this, it makes you be comfortable to do free motion quilting and not worry about quilting your quilts, because it forces us to be able to kind of relax, because it's going to take a little bit of time. Now, when you use the automatic thread cutter doing free motion quilting and thread painting, you will find that it doesn't always work, right? So if I come up here and I touch this automatic thread cutter, and I wanted to let you know there's a reason for that. When you're doing free motion, there is no pressure on the foot when it comes down and your machine is making the cut. And because there's no pressure on it, sometimes the bottom thread doesn't cut. And that's very normal, and you should expect that. All right, coming back over for a second here. So you can see I've got a couple of threads. I always cut the threads off because I don't want to accidentally get my foot caught in those edges. But you can kind of see how quickly that's coming together. Isn't that just beautiful? So I use a lot of rayon thread when I'm embroidering because that's what I have the most access to. But if you're going to work on something that's going to be washed a lot and you want to be able to get more durability, the polyester embroidery thread is great. When you're sewing and you're quilting your quilts, most people are in the habit of using a cotton quilting thread, but I don't. I use the same threads that I'm going to do when I'm embroidering. I'm using rayon embroidery thread, cotton embroidery thread. I will use different weights. I'll use 12 weight, 30 weight, and any different weight that I want to. If I want the front and the back to both look nice, then I'm going to match my thread color in the bobbin Like you can see, I have green thread, but underneath here, that's green thread. It's a very yellowy green, and it looks like there's kind of a mix to it because I've had the top thread coming below the surface. Okay. But I wanted you to be able to see that there's a different color on the top and the bottom. So whenever you're doing something and you want the front and the back to look beautiful, then you want a balanced stitch mostly. But when you're doing a lot of messy thread painting, you don't want a balanced stitch. You want the top thread to go below the surface, right? And so that's a lot of what it's all about, is deciding what effect you want. When I was doing the dragonfly, and this is all thread, if I had not changed my tension and lowered my tension, then all of the stabilizer and the dragonfly, the wings, they would all pucker and pull in. So that's one of the reasons why I need to make sure to leave my tension much lower when I'm doing thread painting. All right. In this case, I was wanting the front and the back to both look nice, and the puffy foam added a lot of stability to it. So I didn't have to worry about anything moving in. So if you know that you're going to be doing thread painting and there's not going to be any fabric, then you've got to make sure that that's where you lower your thread tension. And I'll show you a couple of other examples here. Okay, here was a jacket. This is it started in embroidery. This is an embroidery, but all of the rest of the sunflowers were done in free motion. So I needed to be able to stitch all the way around. I wanted the top thread to come below the surface. So I lowered my tension, and it really didn't matter what I did. The back, I did have a yellow in the bobbin, but you can see it. It looks kind of nice. It doesn't look bad. And I've got a little bit of stabilizer here that hasn't washed away. But the shirt does not look puckered. If I had not lowered my tension, then this shirt would have all pulled in and puckered, and I never would have been able to get it back to the normal tension of what I'm doing. So it really is going to depend upon what kind of stability you have when you're working. And I said I'm going to go back and do the dragonfly next. I can't believe it's already 22. How does it possibly get by so fast? All right, let's see some questions here. You mentioned using a finer needle. Does that mean your thread is 60 weight or finer? No, it doesn't. Because if I want to use a finer needle, like right now, I put in a size 80 top stitching needle because I like to use a lot of metallics. You'll notice in the dragonflies that I use metallics. So if I'm going to work with a lot of metallics, a top stitch needle makes a lot of sense. The size 80 was the size I had, so that's what I put in there. And it did a great job, and I was happy with it. But if I felt like I was working with heavier thread, like a size 12, I might need to put a size 90 top stitch needle in there. I have right now green bobbin thread in so you could see it and it's a rayon. So you can see both sides of it. Both sides will be decorative. But normally if I was doing the sunflower and I wanted the sunflower to look nice on both sides, I would put an orange thread that would match the back. And on the front, I would have the yellow. And so you would see the little bit of the yellow coming to the back, but it would look really nice with the orange. It would almost look decorative with it. So usually I'm going to kind of take that into account when I'm deciding on how I'm doing it. By the way, when I finish this, I'm going to finish this and I'm going to post a picture of it so you'll be able to see what the finished result is, both if it's flat and also if it's wild. If I wanted to make placemats out of something like this, it could be absolutely gorgeous. Imagine these beautiful big sunflowers. Then what I would use is either a fusible fleece or a Timtex, you know, that heavier or inner form, something like that. And that would take the place of the cheap, inexpensive foam because I wouldn't want it to shrink. I would want it to stay flat all the time. And so the inner form would be a perfect batting to use. And I would do this exact same process. I would just have something that wouldn't shrink up. So it would end up staying nice and fine. And there was another question about, does cotton, polyester, or rayon thread work better? Yes, it all works great, but I like shine. So I'm always going to go to something that shines over something that's like a cotton thread that doesn't shine at all. That for me is my line in the sand. I like things to shine. Okay, we're going to go back to the free motion. And this time I'm going to work on the dragonfly, and we're going to see how I add the stitches to start. Remember, all I've got is a couple little pieces of fabric in there. So let's go back, and we're going to bring the dragonfly up. And I have left the yellow thread in so that you can see it. But normally what I would do is I would put a thread color on that would kind of disappear or look a little nicer with it. Well, maybe white would be better. I don't know. We'll keep the yellow in here and see how it goes. Okay. So I'm going to just start wherever. I'm not bringing up the bobbin thread. I have my tension is way down at 2.2 because all I want is that the stitches are going to make, and I've got a piece of stabilizer underneath it. That's the Dissolve Away Max. And I've got another piece of stabilizer I'm going to put on top of it. And now I'm just going to start stitching. And I'm on the zigzag, so I'm going to go back to a straight stitch. All right, and I don't have to take those stitches out. And I'm coming over to the other side. Now, I'm not worried about getting right on the very edge of that fabric. All that fabric that's hanging outside can always be trimmed. But I'm going to go back a couple of times. And now I'm just going to come back and fill it. Now, if you feel like your stitches are very, very small, that means you need to move your fabric faster, or it means you need to slow your machine down. Right now, I have my machine at half speed, and I'm going to go and change back to using the start button, right? I love when I'm learning to free motion quilt, I'll always use the start button because then the needle's going to go up and down, and you're going to hear the speed of the machine never changes when you're using the start stop button. When I want to stop, I'm going to use my foot pedal to stop. I'm just going to tap on my foot pedal and it'll stop. So I'm touching the start stop button. I'm going back over the middle to kind of reinforce that. Notice how the speed of the needle going up and down is very even. So I'm almost stitching all exactly the same stitch length as long as I'm moving the same speed. Now, I tap my foot pedal to stop. Do you notice how it's starting to pucker and pull in? That's showing me that I need to lower my tension. So that's kind of, that's what you're noticing. If you see that it starts to pucker or pull in, then you lower your tension. All right, I'm coming back. I'm using my foot pedal and you can hear me speeding up and going slower. So now what do? Well, let's go and lay the base down for the body. Right now, all I've done is added some stitches to the wings. I'm going to go and make the body, and I don't have a picture, but I know that when I'm doing this, there's the body, and that's how long I want the legs to be. I might decide to change to a satin stitch, so I'm going to change to a satin stitch, and I'm going to change the width of it so that it's only narrow. It's only 2.1, all right? But it's going to lay down a lot more stitches. You see how much thicker the body's getting? And now when I come back down, I'm going to make the satin stitch width, I'm going to bring it up to 3.0. And so it'll be much wider. And I'm just going slow. So what I'm doing here is just laying down layers of stitching, one on top of the other. First, I did a narrow stitch just in case I didn't like it, and it worked out fine, so I made it a little bit wider. Now I'm going to bring it back, And I'm going to go the opposite way. Instead of doing the satin stitch straight across, I'm going to go side to side, and it's going to lock those stitches in even better. The needle's going left and right. I'm just going over that same area. So that's going to really lock those stitches in so they're not going to come undone or fall apart when I wash the stabilizer away. Just going to make that head a little bit bigger, and I can come back. And I think you can see how fast the body is developing. I'm going to cut this and I'll bring it to the main camera so you can see what's going on here. And then we'll see if there's any other questions we have. So pretty cool, right? That was just a simple exercise. And from the back, you can see it. I left the thread yellow so you could see what it looks like. When I started with this one, I had 2 layers of tulle. I used a layer like this, and I used a clear white tulle. And I didn't want to fill in all the stitches. I wanted it to have a little bit of a sheerness to it. In this one, I used a very thick, stretchy knit swimsuit fabric that had a lot of glitter to it. I will probably go over it with a couple of different colors, but at this point, if I wanted to see what it would look like, then I could just wash away the stabilizer and see if it was going to hold together well enough. I can see when I hold it up to the light that right here around the body that I'm seeing thin air. There's no stitching there. So if I really wanted this wing to be stitched to the body, I would need to go back in there and reinforce that stitching to attach it. What I found the first time was where I did these wings, attached them directly to the body, and then I decided I didn't like where they were. So I needed to change them. So I ended up cutting them off anyways. So in that case, it really doesn't matter. Often I will change my idea of what I want something to look like. But in the beginning, I started by stitching the wings to the body. I thought it kind of looked cool. And then when I washed it, I thought, geez, I wish that the wings had overlapped a little bit. You see here how I have one wing. Wait a second, I'm always going the wrong way here. Do you see how I have one wing is overlapping the one behind it? So what I did was I just cut them off. I moved them so that I liked where they were, and then I just stitched them back in place again. And sometimes you can use a little bit of the Roxanne's Basic Glue to kind of place them where you want them to be. The colors, I often take my inspiration from the colors that I'm looking at. Now look at how different this dragonfly is. It is much, much brighter, and the wing of it has got some orange, and you'll see the bottom part is mostly white, right? So I'll take my inspiration from the picture that I printed, but here for this dragonfly, you saw that it had very little stitching to it. On the actual picture, if you look at it up close, there's just some black lines with a black outside edge to it. When I originally did this, I did do the black on the outside, and then I cut a little bit of it off. And because there's fabric in there, if you don't like something, cut it off and stitch it again. So literally took me 15 minutes to make this morning. So sometimes when we think about thread painting, like here, I've got another project up here. All right. We often think that when we're going to thread paint something, that it's going to be a big project. It doesn't have to be. It can be something small, like a dragonfly, that you might decide you're going to add to your image. These are the great ways of learning how to do free motion quilting and thread painting, because it gives you that short little burst. You don't have to be sitting there for 2 hours practicing to make a perfect size heart. You can kind of go in there and have some fun, get some creative projects going, and you can really be getting your feeling of movement and getting your rhythm going, so that when you want to quilt your projects and have that perfect stitching, that you're already relaxed and you can do it. All right, so Jane's got a great question. What's the largest width of stitch you can use with the foot that I'm using? And what I would always do is, it's not so much about that, because I can probably do about a 6 or 7 millimeter stitch. But if I move my fabric too quickly, there's a risk that the needle is going to hit one side of the needle or the other. So I usually don't use any more than a 5 millimeter, even though I probably could go longer. And the reality is I don't even use that. I probably use a 4 millimeter because I'm moving my fabric. So if the needle is going to move side to side, as long as the needle is going from one to the other and I'm moving my fabric, the stitch can be as wide as I want it to be. Like when I turn the fabric sideways, doing the dragonfly, look at the body, how the texture that the body's got going there, right? And I started with a small satin stitch coming straight down. Then I went and added a wider one. Then I went sideways. I literally went sideways. So when I was doing the zigzag, the needle was going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It really doesn't matter what the width of the needle is, the stitches, because it was really more about how fast I was moving the fabric, where that stitch was going to end up. But you can kind of see front and back, there's a nice solid level there of stitching. So now what I would do, and I will do it, I'll change the color and I'll go back and I'll make it a color you can see. But what I would do now is go back and do some like really heavy, dense satin stitches like you would see on the dragonfly. Look at the dragonfly body. You see that it almost looks like one complete set of satin stitch, right? As you're coming down, you'll see there's more color on one side than the other. Often what I would do for that is I'll do like some really heavy areas of satin stitch, and then I'll take my fabric pen and color one side darker so I don't have to bother shading it. Those are like just silly tricks that I do because that's the kind of like the playing that I like to do. All right, so I'm going to come back. I'm going to change the thread and I'm going to show you how you can get that density for something like the body that where you want that extra fullness to it. All right. Okay. And we've just got 10 minutes left. So if you have any other questions, make sure to ask them because I've got a few more things to show you when I come back. All right. I'm going to put on a green thread so that you can see the satin area really nicely. And I'm going to make my satin to start with a 3.0. And then I'll decide how big I want to go afterwards. All right. All right. So I'm going to start this 3.0 right here. Let's see how wide 3.0 is. Oh, it's not very wide at all. It doesn't cover the width of what I've already done. So now I know I can probably go up to a 4. All right. So now I'm doing a 4. And I'm just going back and forth. I'm still on a low tension, which means the top thread is getting pulled to the back. And now I'm ready to move on. So I'm just going to come back and bring my needle back up here to a new place. I won't cut it. I'll just leave it there. And I might make them evenly spaced, or I might decide I'm going to come back with other colors. All right, so now I'm coming back up here and start up again. Now I'm going to make this one wider because through nature, the bigger toward the top, it gets wider. I'm going to make this one 4.5 and it might catch in, or I'm going to go up to a 5.5. All right, which is about as wide as I would go because I wanted you to see what a 5.5 would look like. Well, that's pretty cool. All right, I'm coming back up here. Now I'm going to lower my tension a little bit more because I want that satin stitch to sit on the surface more. All right, now I'll cut it and show you what it looks like. So there we are. You can just see there's some very heavy satin stitches, and I would come back in between and now put a different color in there to fill that up. And so when I'm done, there's just layer upon layer of stitches, but it's a great opportunity to let yourself play. You can see the head. All I do right now is just have a little bit of stitches in place so that when I go to do the satin stitch eyes and the rest of its head, I'll be able to have some stitches underneath that hold it together. Look at the first one I did, how pretty that is. Isn't that gorgeous? And you can see I encapsulated all the previous stitching, so there's no yellow thread showing there. And then I'm going to come back and do the satin stitches all around from there the rest of the way. Okay. All right. Let's come back here and let's look at what else we've got to look at. All righty. Come back. So whenever I am doing any kind of, and I want to differentiate between free motion quilting, which means you're generally just going everywhere once, and thread painting, where you're putting layers of stitches on top of itself, right? So in this felted jacket here that I did, I have lots, wait a second here, I have lots of free motion quilting, but it's just sitting there on top and running beside itself. Like I did with the poppies, it's very dense free motion, but it is free motion because I'm not building stitches. Whenever you're doing that kind of stitching, you want a balanced stitch. You want the top thread and the bottom thread to meet in the surface. When you're doing something like this flower pot, look at the stitching that's here. I have a balanced stitch. That's what I want if the top and the bottom are both going to show. But when I'm thread painting and I'm making something that didn't exist before, I always want that top thread to come below the surface. So when you look at the back, that's the back. You can see all that green thread from the top has wrapped around the back. And that's what I want, because now it didn't pucker, it didn't pull in, and it let me add as much stitches as I wanted to without having a problem. All right. And there's a couple of questions about tension. So I think that's the most important thing. When you're thread painting and you have really very little fabric and you're mostly adding, thousands of stitches when you're thread painting like this, you don't want your stabilizer to pull in. Do you notice how flat that is? For all the stitches I added to the body, there's no puckering. And that's because I lowered my tension. The tension originally on a straight stitch was 4.6, and I come down at around 2.2. If you were to choose a decorative stitch on any machine, when you're doing decorative stitches, the tension is extremely low, just like when it's in embroidery, your tension's very low. And so all we're doing is we're going to be doing our own decorative stitches in free motion. And so we need to bring our tension down and make it very low, just like if we were doing embroidery or our decorative stitches. And I hope that makes sense with the tension. And if not, I'll come back and answer those questions. And let's see, can you bring up one of those finished dragon? Okay, that's I'll bring up this dragonfly here, and let me put this up so you can kind of see it. Wait a second, there you go. So that's the front of it, and then that's the back of it. All right. And you can see it's nothing fancy. It looks pretty great when you see it on my shirt though, doesn't it? And it looks really great when you're using it in your quilts. And let me see where the other one went to, if I can find that one. Maybe it's disappeared. I'll bring the bird up and do the same thing with the bird. All right, so there's the bird. Wait a second. I'll get it right up over there. See the bird? Boy, I'm bad at this. I'm sorry. I have no definition of where left or right is here. So the bird, you can't see. There's so many stitches in here that you really cannot see where one stitch starts and the other one finishes, because there's just so many stitches layered on top of each other. And if I go to the daisy flower, let's see if I can find the daisy. Here's the daisy. All right. Looks the daisy. You see, it kind of almost looks three-dimensional, right? And the stem, I stitched on wire for the stem. Let me hold it up here. That's a piece of metal wire that I did a zigzag over. And then I just stitched it on the back of the flower so it hold it. So this can be any shape I want to. I could make this wire go, and then all I would do is zigzag it in place so that it wouldn't move. The bird is, Jane asked about the bird. Is it just straight stitch? Yes. And you can see from the back of it, if I hold it up here, it doesn't look like anything. The only place where I used satin stitch is for his legs here and for his beak, because I wanted to build up a little bit of volume. And the eye, I did circles for the eyes. So let me see if I can pull up. There was a couple of other things I want to show you. Oh yeah, so this is the puffy foam that I was talking about. anytime you want to. I've done fish. I've done all kinds of different things. If you don't want the item to shrink in, you can use your stitches on a puffy foam. And if you do a satin stitch around the edge, it kind of perforates off and it gives it a very raised look, but it will always stay solid. So what I've done with some of the fish, and I didn't pull that sample in, but what I did with it is I did my embroidery on the fish, and then I just top stitched the edge of it to the quilt that I wanted it to go on. So whenever you see a quilt, no matter what quilt it is that I do, I can guarantee you it's never finished, because I'm always thinking, okay, where do I want to add something? I want to add that, like I want to look like some of the flowers drop down on the ground. So that's what I made the daisy, so that it would drop down on the ground. And we've got a question about, do I ever use a ballpoint needle? Never when I'm doing this. If you have a reason to do it, but that fabric that I was stitching on, that was a stretch knit. I didn't need anything special needle for it. It worked just fine. So usually there's a reason. If I'm going to use a ballpoint needle, it's because I'm working with knits, and most of the knits these days have got lycra and spandex. So usually I would use a stretch needle instead. But I think I'm just about out of time. And I was trying to rush because I had so many things I wanted to show you. There's a couple of things I didn't get to, but I hope you all feel like you can just take a picture of something and either print it or draw it. Like, right, a coloring book. You can take a coloring book, just trace the coloring book image and then start playing around. If you want your life a little bit easier, you can take your, a printed fabric sheet or a flower that you've got on your, look at this, how beautiful this is, right? Look at all these flowers. Cut some of them out and you can, I've got this vest to show. That's how I got started with this. This is, when I say collage, this is what I mean. This is just like tons of different flowers. This flower I cut out, and all of these I laid on the background. I had a main fabric down here, which was this green with the black. And up top, I had a fabric that was this yellow. And all I did was lay flowers down and tack them in place. I used something like the Roxanne's Basic Glue because the needle will penetrate this. And I just put a dab on all of the flowers. And then I started thread painting it. And you can see, this was one of the first things I ever did. I didn't really use any skill with it. If you look at this flower right here, you can see it's pretty rough. I just did a zigzag over the edges. And then I just kind of kept playing with it. But look at how gorgeous the end result is. So challenge yourself to give it a try. In this case, with this vest, I did most of it through all the layers, and because I wanted the inside and outside to look good. And I used a green thread inside, and I wanted it to look puckery, because it kind of gives it like a real quilted look to it when you see that quilted. But just have a look at how fun that is, just by taking flowers and free motioning them in place, layering some leaves, and challenge yourself to do something a little bit different. Okay, that's my goal, is that I hope all of you just take out some project that really inspired you to try it, and then ask me questions, and I'm going to come back and answer them. So thank you all for joining me. And the next Facebook Live is Thursday, September 7th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, 2 p.m. Central Time. Meredith is going to be talking about stabilizers and different types of hooping techniques. So you don't want to miss that, because that's going to be a lot of fun. But please, I really hope that you go and try some thread painting, because you would just be amazed how much fun it is. And it really does improve your free motion quilting. So I can't wait to join you again. I'm not sure when my next Facebook Live is, but I hope to see you there. And out in the stores, I can't wait to see you. We're traveling and we're having so much fun. So it's always a pleasure for you to join me. It means so much to me that you take and spend an hour with me. So thanks for watching, and I'll say goodbye, everybody. Bye-bye.